Kijk, die is een drukke vrouw, dus die
Ja, dat heb ik
te
toen ook
vaak
gezegd.
vragen.
Ja.
Kom wel weer een keer. Hij heeft nu zijn camera, wacht eventjes. Spotlight for everybody. Ja, Rabbi Plancey, you're in. Maar
Yeah,
hij heeft zijn microfoon, ja. Oh, yeah, your microphone is also in.
Your rabbi not in tonight?
Yes, but he was finished already.
He's finished.
He was finished.
Be careful, that's not a good statement.
Okay. The shiur was early finished and he thought.
That's all right, not a problem.
No.
Okay, first of all, lovely to have you back. I hope you all had a good Purim.
Thank you.
With so many shilas about how we could hear the Megillah. But never mind, that's not what I'm talking about. Tonight, I want to talk to you a very interesting subject. And that's, first of all, you should all know that this week's Sedra is Kisisa. It's also Shabbos Parshas Poro, which is actually quite good because it happens to be in the same Sedra. So you don't have to go rolling if you have a mitzvah.
Yeah, it's the same. Oh,
it's the same one. Normally they come. There was one week we had 3 Sifra Torah. Remember? Shab, Parsha, I think it was Shkolim, Rosh Chodesh, Shabbos, everything. Never mind. Let me go on and start as follows. And this is something which I always like to talk about. This Parsha's Porah. But before we get to it, we've been talking over the last few weeks and learning about the Mishkan. This is this beautiful home for Klal Yisrael, all right? V'shochanti b'soichom. Yom is famous that God doesn't dwell in it, but God dwells in each and every one of us. This is what the whole temple, but we call it a Beis Hamikdash when we had it rebuilt. And yet I'm very, very surprised about this. This is my own thoughts, and I'll take the blame for it. We call our home a Beis Hamikdash Me'at, a miniature temple, correct? And the temple we call the Beis Hamikdash. Now, where did the temple come from? Where was the blueprint for the temple? Do you remember? You have to go all the way back to Sarah. In Sarah's house, there were 3 miracles. They stopped when she died, and then when Rivka came back in, it all came back. What were the 3 miracles? The 3 miracles were that the bread which she had in her house lasted from week to week. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever been to Grudzinski's in London, but after a few days, you can actually bang a nail in the wall. Sometimes if you leave it out and you don't wrap it all up, it can really get stale and hard, good and proper. The miracle was that bread lasted in the Beis HaMikdash, which God copied. This is the blueprint. God copied that and put it into the temple on the table. It was called in Hebrew, Lechem Haponim. There was a bread, a showbread, you call it. And there was only 12 loaves, but nevertheless, it was always fresh. And there was enough for every kind who wanted to eat from it. There was always plenty of it there. The second one was that her candle, when she lit her candle Friday night to say Good Shabbos, it burnt for a week. I have enough tzoros on Hanukkah getting oil to burn for 3.5 hours on a Shabbos, because you've got to have it right the way through. But this oil burnt from week to week. What was that? That was the menorah. And finally, we sold that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had a Nanai HaKovod. He had a pillar of HaKadosh Baruch Hu over her tent. That was also represented, if you like, by HaKadosh, the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu with the Oren. So we see that the simple home that you and I live in is a Beis HaMikdash. If you offer hospitality, you are part, they say that there are 3 things that you need to have in a Beis HaMikdash and in a home: Torah, Avodah, and Gemilas Chasodim. What was the Torah? The Torah was the Oren. The Torah is our learning. Avodah is the service, which is actually, believe it or not, the light of the candle. But actually, the Torah could also be represented in the house of Sarah and Sarah by the candle that was lit the whole week. That was Torah Oya. The light of Torah was there. And of course, the Adonai HaKovod was the Avodah, which we pray to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So all these samples which were given to us. So the question I'm going to discuss with you tonight is that this Mishkan was built after HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded Moshe to build all the utensils. Now, if I were to ask any of you here tonight, sitting in front of me, what do you do? Do you buy a house and then buy the furniture? Or do you buy the furniture and then buy a house? And the answer is, obviously, you would buy a house before you buy your furniture. You don't go buy a table and leave it in the street, hoping that one day you'll get a house, you'll take it in with you. So was tut sich da? HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded Moshe, build a table, build a menorah, build an ark, build a mizbeach. Where are you going to put it? They built it. So where's it going to go? Oh, then he told them, you build the Mishkan. That's where it will go when you've built it. It should be the other way around. So I'm going to tell you, and I find this in all the years I've been in Rabbonis, people make more of a fuss of the peripheral than they do of the main part. Have you ever seen some of the people who go in to buy their sons a tallis, or they buy them a set of tefillin? And I'll never forget this. When I get told, Rabbi, we only need a cheap pair of tefillin until he passed the examination that he can do it. But you should see, we've got to get him a tallis bag with a beautiful embroidery on it, with his name on it, with all the spiel on it completely. They make more of a fuss on the tefillin bag and the tallis bag than they do of the actual tallis and tefillin. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling us it's not the building that matters. It's what goes on in the building. Everything in that building represents HaKadosh Baruch Hu from beginning to end. The Mizbeach represents HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Orod represents HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Do you know, there were three things in the Mishkan, three items that have a little crown around the top of it. The Oren had a crown round it. You can see the verses, a crown round it. The golden altar had a crown round it. And the table, the Aron, the Shulchan, the table of the Shobet had it. What's going on here? You know, we're told, Keser Torah, Keser Kahuna, Keser Malchus. Correct? You've heard that with Keser Shem Tov Al Gabeim. It's Pirkei Avos. Crowns. There were three crowns. Remember what I'm saying to you now, because I'm going to teach you. Each and every one of us can have those three crowns. What's the pshat? Its interpretation is as follows. These crowns represented Torah, Avodah, and Gemilas Chasodim. Let's look at this and see it clearly. Keser Torah. Who wore the crown of Torah? That was what we teach our children. We are teachers. We are royalty. We teach our children how to keep the Torah. There's a keser. You get a crown on it, a beautiful crown on it. Keser Avodah. You know, the Avodah was the Mizbeach. The Oren was the Torah, was the Keser Torah. The Mizbeach was the Avodah, which we do in the temple, but we do outside. And the Keser of Keser Torah, Keser Kahuna, and Keser Malchus was represented, believe it or not, listen to this, by the table. Now I'm going to teach you something beautiful, because it's Torah, Avodah, and Gemilas Chasodim. Who wore the Keser of Torah? That you can wear yourself, that you can get. Keser Kahuna, a Kohen was born a Kohen, he would get it. But what was the Kohen's duty? The Kohen's duty was Avodah, service. That's what it was. And what was the king's duty? Keser Malchus, the crown of a king, was to make sure his people, not like we have today with Parliament and the Chancellor of the Exchequer, worries all about the things. But in those days, the king was the one responsible for looking after. By the way, just as a matter of interest, we're still in a Purim mode. Did you ever look at the very last chapter of the Megillah? Mordechai became prime minister. The king then put the crown on his head. And what was the first thing that they did at the end? What was the last? Literally, at the end of the Megillah, they put on taxation. Correct? They put a mas ala'om. They put a taxation over the people. But what happened there? Because if you look and you will see, Mordechai was loved by everybody to begin with. The moment he became prime minister and he put a taxation on, it only says Roy for him, only the majority. He lost the popularity of the people. So you see, no chancellor stands a chance, no politician stands a chance when it comes to budgets. You should see the moment they do that, they lose all their friendships. So look at these three crowns. Each and every one of us can wear that crown. We can wear the crown of Torah because we can put it on ourselves if we learn Torah. Kesef Kahuna, you don't have to be born a Kohen in order to do what a Kohen does, and that is avodah, helping other people. Do you know what Kohen Gadol Aaron did? You remember the story I told you? Aaron was a marriage guidance counselor. Did you know that? He used to go and help people. The story's told, and I remember reading it, where a couple said, I'm going to divorce you unless he says, you spit in Aaron HaKohen's eyes. He heard this. What did he do? He went over to her and he said, I've got an infection. And the only way to cure it is if somebody will spit in my eye. Will you spit in my eye? He was that sort of person who loved other people. He wanted to help other people. We can become Kohanim without being born a Kohen. Kesef Malchus, we can be royalty. If we do the chesed, we help other people. Now, let me tell you, and I reiterate this because it's so important. We talk a lot about tzedakah. All right? We talk about tzedakah. Why don't we change it to chesed? Because tzedakah is limited. It's money, of whatever it is, that you can give only to the poor and the living. Chesed, you can do for the living, you can do for the dead. You can go to a levaya. You can do it for the rich, and you can do it for the poor. What's the rich? You go, for example, Bika Chaylim. That's a chesed. You can go, does it say, you only go and visit poor people? So in other words, if you keep looking at what I'm saying tonight, you will see that every home could be filled with all these three things, with the crowns of Kahuna, the Kesef Malchus, the Kesef Torah, the Kesef Kahuna. They're all there for us to acquire. So that's where the original Beis HaMikdash, the Mishkan, was derived from Sarah Imanu. Her home was full of Torah, full of Chesed, full of Avodah, full of running around. Also, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu dwelt in that. And he built the Beis HaMikdash, which we're waiting to have rebuilt again. This is where it's going to come from. So the Beis HaMikdash had to be built. The utensils had to teach us something even more. That every single utensil in that Mishkan was to remind us not to lose sight of the purpose of what it is. Do we know what a home is for? We think a home is to stop us getting wet. A home is to stop us getting cold. No. A home is for us to do all these mitzvahs and to show HaKadosh Baruch Hu lives in our home. When you light your candles Friday night, do you feel the ruach? Do you feel the spirituality lighting up the room? It's an amazing thing. Shama v'zocha b'dibur echad. It says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes in, Shalom Aleichem. We welcome Malachim, but we also welcome HaKadosh Baruch Hu into our homes. Now, why do you have two candles? You ever asked this question? I believe the answer, and again, I give you a lot of I think myself. So if it's wrong, it's wrong, but I take the blame. It's because to show you the influence that the woman has. For one candle, it lights up in the house, and one candle that lights outside the house. Toichai kebaira. Can you hear it again? What goes on inside should go on outside. The example that we set in the home should be an example which should be set outside. That's the first thing I want to talk about there. So, and by the way, I heard something. I told you last week with, what's his name, Pesach Kron. It was brilliant, if you remember, the marshal about the Oren itself. There's so many things that we can learn. Now, let's go and discuss this Pora Aduma. And this is something which is going to have to take us a little bit of time. Why do we have the Mishkan? Number one, what was the purpose of the Mishkan? V'shochanti b'soichom. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was saying he will dwell in there. Rashi comes along, it's an interesting thing, and he tells us that the Mishkan was to atone for something wrong. What was the worst sin that the Jewish people ever did? And that was the golden calf. Think about it. They've just come out of Mitzrayim. They've been freed. And by the way, I want to tell you, I don't know whether you've got a government in Amsterdam that one minute you say you can get together, the next minute they change their mind, and people will start to become despondent. Am I correct? Similar, every day is a new rule, a new way of doing things. I just wrote an article for an organization for the ladies of Golders Green. And I want to tell you something very beautiful. And we're going to start already on Pesach, because it says 30 days before Pesach, before the Chag, you start learning all about the Chag. And don't think it's going to be miserable, because it shouldn't be. There's an opportunity to be able to sit, to learn, and to appreciate. I'm going to tell you. Matzah zu she'onu oichlim. Why do we eat matzah? Because we couldn't bake our dough in time. Is that the answer? Do you know, by the way, they were eating matzah in Mitzrayim? Al matzah sumrorim yachluhu. They ate the korban Pesach, right? They ate that Paschal lamb in Egypt with matzah, with Menorah. So why is it? What does it come along and says? They didn't have time to bake their dough. Why didn't they? They were given plenty of warning. Well, let me tell you what I think. I'm going to change this matzah from lechem oini, poor man's bread. You know why it's called poor man's bread? Because it's a very expensive bread, believe me. But if you break it, it becomes, when you break the Afrikaner away, if you ask somebody to give you a loaf of bread, you don't give them a cutaway loaf unless you've got nothing else. But you give them a full matzah. You don't break it. It's poor man, it's broken. But why is it called, what else could you call it? I'm going to give you a different name for it. And it comes from the following. The first plague, Moshe Rabbeinu came, and he said to Klal Yisrael, get ready, we're going. Correct? He said, we're going. So what did they do? They went to the local bakery, they bought drinks, they bought cake, they baked bread, matzah, whatever it was they were making, and they had all their packles packed up lovely. Then, listen to this. It ended the plague. We ain't going out, sorry, we're not going. Oi, there was a disappointment. Could you just imagine? All right, just imagine. You get the government saying, you can start going back to life, it's normal. And then a few minutes later, they say, sorry, I made a mistake. You got to stay at home. Comes the second plague. Moshe said, this time I'll go. Don't worry. So they start getting prepared again. What happens? They ain't going out. A disappointment. Think about this. 9 times there's a disappointment about going out and not going out. How would you feel if somebody said to you, let me give you an example. It's a very far-fetched example. A chosn kala, I'd like to marry you. Oh, lovely, get ready, get you all go organize a wedding. I've changed my mind. And if it happens 9 times, well, how do you think a kala would behave? She would tell him, come on, I don't believe a word you're saying. Correct? Klal Yisrael lost something by the 9th plague. They lost their emunah and betochen. They lost their faith and they lost their trust. They said, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not going to take us out. We can forget it. Comes the Makas B'chayras, comes to the plague of the death of the firstborn, comes to midnight, Moshe says, we're going, get ready, we're going. Oh, we haven't got anything prepared yet, nothing prepared. So they've quickly put a bit of dough together, stuck on their shoulders, and they all went out. So that matzah should be called lechem emunah. It's called the bread of faith. They lost their faith and they had to get it back again. And it was so important they got it back again. You got the message now? Lechem emunah. It was the bread of faith, which Klal Yisrael had to have. So that's why, by the way, that we have all this lechem, the bread and everything from the matzah to eat. And that's why what it's called there, the last night. But let's go back again. So Klal Yisrael were in there. They left Mitzrayim with all these wonderful, wonderful simonim, signs, miracle after miracle. Let me tell you, if you see a miracle, And many people have seen miracles. I've seen one, more than one, but one was particular to me. I was called into the hospital near me. I was chaplain at the time. Rabbi, it was 3 o'clock in the morning. There's a lady there. Unfortunately, she's going to pass away very shortly. Could you come and visit her? I said, look, of course I'll come and visit her. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, I go into the hospital to the intensive care. And this lady's lying on the table there, on the bed, whatever it was. She says, Rabbi, kannst du heimgehen? You can go home. Ich starb nicht. I'm not going to die. Der doctors verstehen a krank. The doctors don't know what they're doing. I said, oh, all right. So I went out to the doctor. I said, look, she said she's not going to die. She told me to go home to bed. That's where I'm going. He said, I'll see you in the morning because you'll probably be needed in the morning. I said, I'll be back in the morning, irrespective. Well, I went back in the morning and she's sitting there having breakfast. I said, Doctor, was tut sich da? What's going on here? There's only one thing I could say, Rabbi, he said to me. It's a miracle. How many times have you seen a miracle? I've seen it and I've read about it, where people were so-called on this life support machine, told me they're going to switch it off, and they do, and they breathe and they start living again. I've seen it happen over and over again. There's only one person responsible for miracles, and that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Klal Yisrael did not appreciate the miracles that were going on. So let me get back again to what I was saying. We have this pandemic, and I always think every single thing and everything in the Sedra, there's always a way of proving it from a Sedra. We were promised to go and we're told to change our mind. Then we will go and change our mind. We have to have the whole of this time, when the government say it's all right, then they change their mind. We've got to have understanding that it's all up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's all down to emunah and betochen. Nothing else. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu who rules the world. Nothing else. Sadly, not only did they lose their emunah when they were in Mitzrayim, they come out, and a few years later, what do? They build a golden calf. Moshe's told in heaven by Rabbi Shalom, your people have gone cuckoo. I don't think he would use that language, but he told them, you better go down quick. So what does he do? He takes the 2 tablets, and he takes them and he runs downstairs. Remember what's happening? He then throws the tablets into the golden calf, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu blesses him for this. You hear me? HaKadosh Baruch Hu blessed him for having broken up the tablets. Now, I don't understand what's going on here. Moshe Rabbeinu can't understand this. They're just, why did they build this golden calf? And you're coming to tell me that the Mishkan is an atonement for the golden calf. How does it fit together? By building a Mishkan, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will forgive you for the golden calf. I'm going to answer it with the following. You know that how did Aaron relates the whole story? What happened, he says, I took a piece of gold, I threw it into the fire. I didn't ask for anything. I just threw it into the fire. And what came out of the fire was this Egel Azov, this golden calf. And by the way, they say that the Poro Aduma, the red heifer, is the atonement. It's the mother coming to apologize for the son. You got me? The Egel Azov, the golden calf, did the sin. So the Poro Aduma comes to atone, although we don't understand the whole theory, but she's coming. But let me see, this is what Aaron said, but he says, Aaron said something different. He said, I threw it in, and what happened was, this Rashi says that the calf grew up by itself. It was formed by itself. He didn't build it, it came up by itself. There's a similar phenomena happens and occurs in the Mishkan. What was it? The menorah. Did Moshe know how to build a menorah? Do you remember? He didn't. It was so intricate. One piece of gold had to be hewn out and to be grown. So how did he do? He took the gold, he says, from the menorah, and he said, what did he do with it? He said it was indicates that the menorah was formed by itself. He didn't do it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu made a miracle that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so Hashem told Moshe, throw the chunk of gold into the fire, and the menorah would emerge on its own. Can you see already what's happening? The menorah built by itself, the Egel HaZohar was built by itself. So the menorah and the golden calf were just casting gold into the fire. So what's the significance of the fact that they did it by themselves? Well, the answer is as follows. The commentators state the following. The Chachamim say, what was the sin of the golden calf? It was not that they wanted to worship the calf. Do you remember the story? It's an amazing thing, this. The people were scared. They spoke to Moshe, not to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They wanted an emissary. They wanted an in-between, a go-between. That was what their problem was. The sin was that Klal Yisrael were proposed and were to innovate. They started to innovate. Listen to this. Their own form of relating to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Up till now, how did they relate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Through Moshe. But now he's gone, they said. He's late, he's gone, he's not coming back. So how are we going to get to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? This is what they were saying. They innovated something, which was a chutzpah. Now let's look at the Mishkan. You'll read about this. Vayas ka'asher tzivu Hashem es Moshe. Every single thing that was made and done in that Beis HaMikdash, in that Mishkan, was done by Moshe following the command of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Let me tell you something. When you see somebody baking a cake, ladies, I'm sure you'll see them making a cake. Oh, by the way, I've got a better ingredient than this. I can tell you a different way to do it. But this is what it's telling us here. We don't need to have any innovations. If you know how to do it, you do it. But Moshe was told what to do. He didn't want to innovate anything. The Mishkan was teaching us, if Hashem tells you to do something, that's what you do. You don't change it because you're an architect. Remember, there were a lot of architects and artists and everything who were in the wilderness. Not everybody was just an ordinary Poshet Jew. They were all there completely craftsmen. Do you know, I was talking to an architect, and this is Emmis, and he said that they were more advanced then than we'll ever be. Think about it. They put up staves. How did they stand with it? I've tried it, and it collapses. But they built special joints that they would stand there together and wouldn't fall down. It was an amazing thing. The architecture was something just unbelievable. How did they get? You know something? I'm sure you've all been to the Mokum Beis HaMikdash, the Kotel, yeah, or the Kotel Maravi, the Kotel. Have you ever seen the size of the stones that are there? Massive. And yet they managed to get them there. I'll tell you something else, by the way. The Havdil, I've got to say the Havdil, completely different. Have you ever seen a photograph of the pyramids, which a lot of them were built by Yidden? Remember, in Egypt, the slave. Do you know the architecture and everything that was going? Do you know how brilliant they were? There is nothing new. Ein chodosh tachas hashemesh. There's nothing new. There was a rabbi in the 15th, 16th century called Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz. He was talking about the Tower of Babel. He said there wasn't a tower that they took bricks to reach heaven. They knew they couldn't reach heaven with bricks and mortar. So what was it? He says Migdal Bavel was a form of transport. We'll put it into modern English, a spaceship. What was the fuel that they used, he said? Burning the bricks. Have you ever talked about atomic power? Burning the bricks. That was what it was. And that was the most expensive. That's why that was more expensive than the human life at that time. They knew that they'd have to fly. I always say as well, by the way, another thing, Eliyahu Novi, yes? How does Eliyahu Novi fly? He's got a golden spaceship flying around. Whenever you need him, he turns up. Have a look, read through it very carefully, and you will see there is so much that it tells us about this. Tell me, when you have as well, where's the first computer? And don't tell me I'm an apikoyanis. Where's the first computer? I believe it was what the Kohanim wore, the breastplate. Do you ever think about it? He put on all the 12 tribes on it. This was the alphabet, and he typed in a question and the answer typed up. How did he get the stone? What have you got watches? Have you ever heard of the quartz stone, which is the battery? The quartz is a battery. Did you know that? From the olden days, you wound it all up. Do you remember the olden days? You wound up your watch. I've got my Father Sham's watch, 100 years old. I wind it up once and it just dies on me. My own watch here, I just put a new battery in and it works because it's got quartz stones in it. It keeps it going. There is a Rashi, which I found called, and in Rashi it talks about the radio. The radio. You hear me? How was Moshe able to communicate with millions of people and they all were able to hear him? Did he have microphones? What was going on? The miracles, the things that they had in those days. We've got to understand, Ein Chodesh Tachas HaShemesh. Nothing is new. And when we talk about the mon, this is the problem today. And you know, I must tell you, when they complained about the mon, and they complained about the water, they complained and complained. You hear it as well, we hear it all as well, but people say, oh, I had that supper last night, I had that supper yesterday. It's Meshiga, but this is how they do it. So we find, if you look again, let's look again and see what was going on. He says, telling us the instance of the menorah was coming to inform us here. It couldn't be fashioned by Moshe, but instead a miracle happened. So Moshe was the greatest man alive, was unable to comprehend everything. So to attempt to innovate changes in his service, contrary to his wisdom, is illogical. How can we change something if HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us something when we don't understand how even we can do it? He tells you build a menorah. You look at the menorah. Think about it. We had flowers. We had bells. We had just unbelievable. And in fact, I have a sefer here. I don't know if you've ever seen the sefer. See if I can get it out for you. This is, oh, that's Pirkei Avos. That's not what I want. If you look, you'll see. This was the Mishkan. I don't know if you've ever seen this book. Yeah. This is the Mishkan. And it's absolutely magnificent because you will see, if I can get the what I want to show you is the menorah. The menorah. There's so many different interpretations to how it was built, but it had flowers on it. Big arguments as to how it looked. Can you see all the different? There's this side. There's this side here. And by the way, what the menorah represented was not just the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it was something more specific. And this is the Chofetz Chaim says it. There are 6 branches on the menorah, not 7, or not 8, 6 branches on that, 3 on either side, and 1 in the middle. The one in the middle was the one which lasted right the way through. That was the Ner Tomid, which we have in Shul today. That represented HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Torah. The other 6, says the Chofetz Chaim, and I've seen it written. He says it represents the 6 sciences of the world. The 6 sciences. Somebody accused Rabbi Kanievsky of not knowing a certain thing. I'm going to tell you, I had in Glasgow, I had a Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Shapiro, Zichron Tzadik Livrocha, and he couldn't speak a word of English when he came. And I asked him, where did he used to tell me, he says, I'm Rabbi Shapiro, M.A. I said, what's your M.A.? He said, a university degree. He said, but you can't speak English. I said, you can't read. What did you get it on? He said, geography. I thought he was pulling my leg. Do you know how he did it? He told me. He sat and learned Gemara. He says, if you look at the Gemara, and he showed it to me, you know, you talk about the time, there's an hour's timings, and it's this, all the different times, and it's unbelievable. The geography in the Gemara, the medicine in the Gemara. Have you ever read medical stuff in the Gemara? It's unbelievable about it. So what we're saying here is the kapara is that just as we can't innovate new ideas into the building of the Mishkan, it had to be done the way God said it. Even if you were the brilliant artist, don't change it. That was the apology for people coming along and saying, we can't talk to God directly, and Moshe's not here, we need to innovate something new. It was wrong of them having to innovate. Have you got the connection now? Therefore, the Mishkan was the atonement for the Aporo Aduma, which we read tomorrow. It all comes very beautifully together. So now we come to a few other questions which I want to discuss with you. Number one, what did he do? HaKadosh Baruch, by the way, I told you, he says, it says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, thank you for breaking them. But what's going on here? Number one, why were the luchas split? They were right the way through. It's a miracle. Have you ever seen the letters? Have a look. They can stand, an aleph can stand by itself. That's like, for example, sheker and emes. Emes has got legs. Aleph has got 2 legs. Mem has got a base. And Tov has got 2 legs. Sheker, is the shin is a point, he's only got 1 leg. Kuf has got no legs, Bichlal. And the Reish has got one leg. Can't stand. Sheker cannot stand. So in other words, Emes has to be from the Aleph to the Tov. In order to be accepted by everybody, it has to be an Aleph to Tov. The same thing as well, says HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When he wrote the Luchas, he wrote them on right the way through, cut through. So whichever way you looked at the Luchas, another miracle. You could read the Luchas. If you turned it around, look, if I turn it round, the Mem, by the way, Samach and Mem floated. That was the miracle there. But if I write a letter on one side and I turn it around, it's backwards, correct? You'd see the back of it, not the front of it. And yet the miracle was that if you turned it around, you could see the front as well. It was whichever way you looked at it, you saw the Aseres Adibros. What's it emphasizing? It was told a story, a very interesting story I read, where a man went to his Rav and he said, Rebbe, he says, I'm going to do a business deal. He said, it's not against halacha, but he said, it's a bit shady. He said, you can't do that. He said, why not? He said, I'm not breaking halacha. He said, it's just a shady business. He said, the luchas, he said, whichever way you look at it, was Torah. Whichever way you look at your shady deal, you're doing something wrong. Even although you think, looking at it face on, you're not doing anything wrong, turn it around and you'll see there's something very wrong with doing it. So don't do it. So the question now is, when he brought down the luchas and he broke them, all right? So the question we've got to ask is, why didn't he leave the second set of luchas upstairs? You know, there were two stones. I told you this. There were 2 stones. The first 5 being Adam Lamoka, between man and God. The second 5 was between man and man. The golden calf was what? Between man and God or between man and man? It was between man and God, correct? And therefore, take that one and bring it down. Why are you bringing both sets down? He says, no, he says, both sets have got to work together. If you remember, I did that with you 2 weeks ago. If you break one law at the front, Ben Odom Lamokam, you break another one in Ben Odom Lechavera. It's balanced. He said, by the fact, and I'll remember there was a Rosh Yeshiva in London. He's no longer alive. He said, you know why Moshe Rabbeinu took them? It wasn't temper. He says, remember the miracle was that, if you remember, was it Rabbi Yehuda when he got burnt? You remember they put the Sefer Torah, wrapped him around, put cotton wool, the Asura Haruge Malchus, the 10 martyrs. It says that the letters of the Torah went floating to heaven, and it was only the parchment that remained there. The Torah didn't get burned. The same thing is with the Luchas. The letters were taken back up to Shemayim. It was only the stones that got smashed. So the question is, why did he break the 2 stones? One would have been sufficient. And the answer is, no compromise. Do you hear what the words? No compromise. If it's the Torah, it's the Torah. If it's Tarfus, if it's Treif, it's Treif. You can't say it's a shtickle kosher or a shtickle treif. It's either or. One or the other. You can't have it half and half. It's got to be complete. So here Moshe Rabbeinu took those luchos to emphasize to Klal Yisrael, I'm not having this. There can be no compromise. You either keep the Torah or you don't keep the Torah. Now, I'm going to be very controversial tonight because I've just read the news from Eretz Yisrael. They've accepted the gairus of reform and liberals and goodness knows what. What are they doing? Why is this compromise coming in? This is Ben Odom Lamokim. If they're not going to keep the Torah, what's the point of it? Again, I've told you, unless there's Ben Odom Lamokim, the Ben Odom Lachavera is pointless. It has to be both. They have to work together. And that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to him, he says, that I feel the Oima, even if you were to turn around and say the Gemara in Sanhedrin, Kol HaTorah Kula Min HaShamayim, the whole Torah is from heaven, Chutz Mipasuk Echad, except for one verse. Hu Diber Hashem Bazeh Ein Lo Chelik L'Olam Haba. If he says HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't say all of it, he's got no chelik in Olam Haba. Do you hear the apicursus? I must tell you, you want to hear about apicursus?
Oh,
You
yeah.
probably know that
Yeah.
I, at the moment, I'm the mayor in Hartsmere, and there were two gay men, LGBTQ, and I gave a shiur on a paper which spoke about these chevra. I said they're very welcome in shul. I said, but as far as the mice is concerned, the behavior, I said, this, it says the Torah says it's forbidden. I was called homophobic. So, of course, I took them to court. So far, I haven't had an apology. You can't understand. They don't understand. The Torah is min hashomayim. The Torah can't be changed. The Torah knows what it says. And I'm going to tell you a proof of this. Kibud v'aim, yes? Just to put you into this. What is the mitzvah? Kaved es avicha v'ibecha, leman yarichen yamecha al adama. You'll get long life, v'yitav loch, and it'll be good for you. We know by the shiluach hakad, send the bird away. It's the only other mitzvah which is identical. But what does it say in a different order? It's yarich. It says yitav loch and yarichen yamecha. You'll enjoy it, and it'll be good for you, and you'll get long life. Make up your mind. You have long life, it'll be good life. What's going on? And the answer is, when you put shiluach hakad, you want the pleasure immediately. You either want the bird or you want the eggs. It's obvious. But if you do it, then you'll have a long life. You'll be blessed because you've got chesed, you do it. But with parents, honoring parents, what do we want? Tell the emes. I said, Yarichon Yomecha, you'll have a long life, but v'yitavloch, you will enjoy the same pleasures that you give to your parents, that your children will look after you. Do you hear the bracha we're getting? This is a bracha, I'm telling you. It's a bracha which is given to Klal Yisrael. Unbelievable. Here. So here we go along, and we're telling us, therefore, that of all the faiths, that Moshe Rabbeinu brought it down. So we're told as well, quite clearly, the mitzvahs have come from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ashreinu Matov Chalkeinu. It's written on both sides to tell us, whichever way you look at it, no deviation whatsoever from any of the times. Now, I'm going to tell you, the Torah is one of the nicest of all the Sforim, whichever, if people would only look at it and understand all the halachas, they're just unbelievable. And by the way, I'm learning at the moment Sefer HaChinuch. You should learn it sometimes. It was by a father, an unknown father, teaching his children Torah. And I'm going to tell you something which is very beautiful. What's the reason? What's the first two mitzvahs that were given to Klal Yisrael? Beautiful mitzvahs. We had it already. Chodesh hazeh lochem rosh chodoshim. We are responsible for the calendar. You hear me? No deviations. We're responsible. But what else? It was Korban Pesach, to make the Paschal lamb. Now that seems rather strange. Surely, HaKadosh Baruch Hu were the first mitzvahs he should have given to Klal Yisrael when he spoke to them after they left, should not have been HaChodesh hazeh lochem. It should have been Anochi Hashem Elokecha. I am HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Why does he have to go to this? Because he's answering in the human nature. Please understand that the Torah is speaking in your language and in my language. He's talking to you and he's talking to me. And he's telling you. What's he saying to you? He said to them, I told you, by the way, once you've left Egypt, all right, they're on the way out. They lost their emunah. He's going to give it back to them again. So what does he tell them? You're now no longer slaves. You are responsible for your own time now. Do you hear that? A slave can't be responsible for his time. He has to do what his master tells him. But a free man can do what he likes, or he thinks he can do. Avodaihem. God says they're my servants. You don't work for anybody else. You don't do anything for anybody. You work for me. You do according to my will, to my wish. So you will give the Kedusha to the time, to the month, to the day, to the year. Lochem Rosh Chodoshim. This you will get to the month, and you will see, by the way, and then this Sefer Achinuch says, it's nothing to do with days. It's nothing to do with years. It's to do with months. How do we get a leap year? With an extra month. How do we do our timing? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling us, utilize your time properly. Nega yomom v'loila. We've got to remember, when you eat, why do we eat? We eat to live, not live to eat. Why do we work? We work to live in order to be able to spend time learning. So we see that for the first thing HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to us was, you're in charge now of time. Secondly, what does a servant eat? Whatever he can chap his hands on, what he can grab. No, you're no longer a servant. From now on, you'll be malochim. What do we say? Mamleches koyanim v'goy kodosh. You are a royal family now. And I don't like people saying you're the chosen. We are the chosen. But we're the chosen to set an example to the world. Not just to ourselves, but to the world. And we have to realize and emphasize that what we do in our actions affect every single person in Klal Yisrael. Do you hear that? This is something unbelievable. That's why in Rosh Hashanah, by the way, I mean Yom Kippur, sorry. What do we say in Yom Kippur? Mutar lispalel imo vayonim. We're allowed to pray with even the sinners because we want to bring them back. We want to be an example to Klal Yisrael. So he's telling us, when you eat like royalty. There's a Gemara which tells us we mustn't eat standing up. You go to a kiddush, you should put it on a plate and sit down. Because why? It says a kelev, only a dog eats standing up. We're human beings, we're above it. When you eat, you say thank you. Mamleches koyanim v'goy kodosh. I'll never forget when I went to, I used to go to a lot of royal functions. And the first thing they tell you before you go in is when the Queen puts her fork down, and she's finished what she wants, that little bit, you put your fork down and don't eat anymore. You've got to act like the Queen. You've got to act like royalty. I'll never forget that. When I went home, I had supper again. All had a kosher meal for me. But this is an interesting thing. There's the two mitzvahs, freedom to be responsible for your own time, and also how we eat. Now I'm going to finish with something beautiful. You know, I started at the very, very beginning about what we say here, that the matzah was called lechem emunah, correct? That's how I started. And I said to you, the most important thing that we need at the moment with all this pandemic, however much they say it's better, I'm scared it'll come back again. They'll tell you 1 minute, they'll do a change in another. I'm going to tell you something which I've written down, and I want you to listen carefully to it because it's a very moving story. It's only a bit of a moshel. 4 candles slowly burned. The ambience was so soft, you could almost hear them talking. The first candle said, I am peace. Shalom. The world, he said, this candle is full of anger and fighting. Nobody can keep me lit. Then the flame of peace went out completely. Have you been reading the newspapers again that Israel is being accused of dreadful atrocities during the wars? Only Israel, by the way. Everybody else can blow each other up in China and everywhere, but only Israel. He said, this is the problem. He said, the flame of peace is completely put out in the world. The second candle said, I'm emunah. I'm faith. He said, I'm no longer indispensable. It doesn't make sense that I stay alive for just another moment. People have lost their emunah. Just then a breeze softly blew out faith's flame. The third candle began to speak. I am love. Ahavo. People don't understand my importance. They put me aside. They forget to love those who are nearest to them. I haven't the strength to stay lit. Do we see what I'm saying? What's going on in the world today? How this is just describing the world. And waiting no longer, love's flame went out. Suddenly, a child entered the room and saw 3 unlit candles. Why aren't you burning? You're supposed to stay lit till the very end, the little boy said, crying his eyes out. The 4th candle answered, don't be afraid. I am hope. You hear me? With shining eyes, the child took the candle of hope and lit the other candles. While I am still burning, we can relight the other candles. The flame of hope, tikva, should never go out from our lives. Because if we've got the hope, if we've got the understanding of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, each of us can live our life with peace, faith, love. You know something? All we have to do is to pass it across to others. And let me conclude tonight with a beautiful story. And you will realize, because we're coming now to Pesach, and Pesach is going to be a very sad time for a lot of people celebrating by themselves. But you've got to think of the following. There was a Jewish artist. He wanted to paint a picture and retire. One final picture. So what did he do? He went out to find an inspiration. He saw children playing there. And he said, what should I paint? And the little kid said, paint faith. We've got faith in growing up in this world. We'll be all right. He then saw, looking down, he saw a bride and a chosn kala. And he asked them, he said, what should I paint? And can you guess what he said? Paint love. He says, because look at us. We love each other and love will carry us through life. He then saw a soldier. He said to the soldier, what should I paint? He said, paint peace. He says, because war is a very nasty thing. The artist was in a terrible dilemma, in a quandary. 3 things he was told he should paint. Faith, love, and peace. But they're all intangible objects, correct? How do I paint faith? How do I paint love? How do I paint peace? It's not a painting that I can paint. So he went home very despondent. But there, at the door, his children were standing waiting for Daddy to come home. Oi, they were dancing. Daddy's home. They had faith. They had faith in his daddy coming home. Lovely. Then the wife came up and gave him a little kiss, told him, darling, I'm so pleased to see you. She loved you. And finally, he went into the home. And what did he find in that home? He found peace. He found tranquility. I'm telling you now, friends, what did he paint? He painted the image of a Jewish home. A home full of shalom. A home full of emunah. A home full of betochen. A home full of ahava. That's what we need today in our homes. However much we're stuck in it by ourselves, however difficult it is, if we've got all these things, these ingredients, we're living in a Beis HaMikdash. We're living in a Mishkan. We have a table. The time will come. We'll be able to put bread on the table and bring other people back in again. We light our candles Friday night. We lit them at Hanukkah. We light them in Yom Tov. We'll be able to see the brightness of the light coming in, but we'll put candles on the table again. We'll make a birthday party, whatever it is. We'll see it there. That's already the light. We see love because our children phone us, our friends phone us, family are phoning us, people are sending in things, the chesed that we're seeing, all there. That's the Jewish Mishkan. And that's what I wanted to get over to you tonight. We don't have to innovate anything. It's already there for us. Moshe Rabbeinu taught us through HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Go for the Mishkan. Don't go for the Egel HaZohov. Don't go for the golden calf. The golden calf, the money won't get us anywhere. Believe me, it will not get us anywhere. I'll just end up with one medrash. It's an interesting thing, this. We're laying this. and always aser to aser. You shall surely tithe your produce, correct? You'll give tzedakah. So there's the medrash comes along, a strange medrash, by the way, and that medrash says, from Avram Avinu, you go to the left, I'll go to the right. You go to the right, I'll go to the left. You remember Avram with Lot. So what's the connection between giving charity and Avram Avinu? And the answer is as follows. Aser, give a tenth of your produce, tithe it. The dot is where? On the left, correct? God said, if you put the dot on the left and give charity, I will change it and put it on the right. Asher, you'll become rich. You'll be wealthy. But to asher, if you only want to accumulate and you don't want to give, then I'll put the dot on the other side. Aser, all you'll get is a tenth. You'll get a limited amount. The connection is very simple. We give tzedakah. We help other people. You know, I told you again, I'm changing it from tzedakah to chesed. Bika Chaylim is phoning up somebody and asking them. Halvoyas Hames is going onto the Zoom and giving nechama to people. Chnosas Kala, we're going to be careful that we're only one of the 30 people invited. Don't turn up, don't be broigus. We just have the simcha in our hearts for these people as well. But what's the most important part of all? Talmud Torah keneged kulam. Learning Torah is the answer to everything. And that's what Pesach is about. We sit together, we learn, and we can do this. We can prepare a Seder, and we prepare it, we look. And I hope, please God, next week, if all's well, I'm going to start looking, because there's only 3 weeks till Pesach. So for 2 weeks, we'll do a shtickle the Haggadah, and let's have a look and see some of the chidushim that I've done over the years. I've gone through that Haggadah when I was in the hotel in Bournemouth, and believe me, there's a lot of hidden secrets in that Haggadah. I've got a whole bookcase full of for all Haggadahs, each and every one. You know, it's the only sefer that has got more copies of it than any other sefer that's ever been written. None on this side as well. Lord, I mean, I've got, interesting though, the Lubavitcher Rebbe says, how many sons were there? He said, you think there are 4? He said, I'll tell you there are 5. Okay, I'll give you another one. I'll give you 6. Okay, my one is a 6th one. What are the 4 sons? Just quickly. The 4 sons are Chacham, Rosh, Tam, Shein, and Elish. The wise, the wicked, the simple, the young. Correct? The Lubavitcher Rebbe said there's one missing. He's the one that's gone completely off the rails. He didn't even turn up. He's gone. And that's the one you've got to think of to get back. I'll give you another one. What's the opposite of a Rosha? Is not a Chacham. If you look at these sons, the Chacham's a wise guy. Now, a wise guy is a critical definition of somebody. Thinks himself big. Oh, he's always asking questions. The opposite of a Rosh is a tzaddik. A tzaddik is there sitting at the Seder learning. And he doesn't have to ask questions. He wants to answer your questions. He's got emunah. He's got betochen. I've already got you 6 sons. So you see, you can go on and on and on. What's the point of Dayenu? To translate it properly? If God wouldn't have given us a Torah, we'd have been satisfied. If he wouldn't have taken us to Israel, we'd have been satisfied. I'm sure we wouldn't. We Jews are never satisfied. So what does Dayenu mean? Let's look at these things and look at them. So up to now, it's Shabbos Poro Aduma. It's Shabbos Parshas Poro, the red heifer, to do it again, Teshuvah. Let's show our emunah. Let's show our betochen. Our innovation should be to make Shabbos with such a chain and such a lebedikheit that we know it's coming to Pesach and not feeling miserable and upset that we're on our own or whatever it is. And Mirz Hashem, B'shor Toiva, we give the bracha. The segula should be just like the doctor said to me, Geh heim and schlafen, ich starb nicht morgen. I'm saying to you, get ready for Pesach because the Mashiach will be here and then we'll be able to celebrate it properly. That's my bracha, that we'll all be in Yerushalayim, Habenuya, and we'll be built in the Beis HaMikdash, and you'll be able to turn around. You want to look for the crowns around the table, the crowns around the Oren, the crowns around the Mizbeach, because we'll all be wearing the crowns of Naaseh V'Nishma. That's what I hope we'll get from Mashiach B'Menorah B'Yameinu. Shkoyach, have a lovely Shabbos, and thank you very much indeed for listening.
It was very good tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Terrific.
Thank you very
Plancey.
much.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much. Good Shabbos.
Oh,
Good
beautiful.
Shabbos.
All right. Thank you very much.
Good Shabbos. Thank you.
I'm blocking myself out now, and I'm going to have some.
Yeah, I look out.
God bless. Good night.